Part of the fun of these questions and part of the challenge of them is that I'm trying not to think too much about them. I do have to go through the list and weed a few out just because I think either they're silly or they're not relevant. But when I get the 10 that I'm going to respond to, I'll do a little thinking about them, but I'm trying to stay as conversational as I can just because I think that's the point of such questions, to spark conversation. So uh, forgive me if it sounds too rehearsed. Uh, when do you feel truly alive? When I think about that, I think being out on the Oregon coast, there's just something about the air, the freshness, the pristine coast, uh, the breeze. It's just, there's something in the air there that is just very life giving and exciting for me. It's not so much, there are no big cities on the coast there. There isn't necessarily a lot to do. But if you're into outdoors and just walking on the beach or taking a hike, uh, there's a lot to do there. But I think just being there, the smell of the evergreen trees, driving through the mountains, it's a wonderful place. What fact are you resigned to? Uh, it sounds kind of dark, but I think the fact that life is difficult. Uh, there's a lot that's great about life, but I think the danger is to think that it's only supposed to be fun, only supposed to be wonderful, only supposed to be pleasant every day. Um, I think it's freeing if we can just acknowledge life is difficult. It's helpful just to say that when it's difficult, and acknowledge, that's how it is for most people on the globe. It's how it is, how it's been for most people who've preceded us. That lots of hard days to their lives, and it's part of what inspires me about thinking about people's lives who've gone before us, whether it's the saints or family members or members of this community who've died, to think about the sacrifices and the challenges that they had to make or had to meet. Uh, it's inspiring to think, well, if they can do it, hopefully I can too. What book impacted you the most? Um, I really did think about this question because, there have been plenty. But when I think about a book that really excited me and that was life changing, I would have to say it's The Changing Face of the Priesthood by a man who's a priest named Donald Cousins. He was a guy who really was a voice in the wilderness, I guess back in the early 90s, maybe mid to late 90s, but took some incredible chances and I think really articulated a lot about life as a priest these days. And a lot that's wonderful, but a lot that's challenging, and a lot that we as a church, I think, since have started to come to terms with. That the priesthood, it does evolve. It's supposed to, and resisting that, I think, is the danger, and it's what's gotten us into trouble so many times. What's the best thing about you? I think a lot of people tell me I'm calm, and they like calmness. I do think the world is pretty. That's the opposite of that. There's a frenzy in the world. So if I can bring calmness to the world, I'm happy to do that. I think there's a humility that people continually tell me that I have a spirit of humility, and uh, I'm happy to embody that and bring that as a gift. What would a mirror opposite of yourself be like? Well, that's a great question on the heels of that last one. I would say probably pushy, aggressive, um, boisterous, loud. Uh, uh, those things are not me. I don't think I could be those things if I tried. But those are good things in other people, but they're sure not me. But I'm grateful for the people who are more aggressive and strong and pushing things forward. What irrational fear do you have? I hate to admit it, it's grasshoppers. When I was a kid, I used to love frogs and grasshoppers and insects of all kinds. But there was a time my siblings and I went fishing at a pond on my grandparents' land, and our grandpa drove us there. and then was going to come back and get us. And I got tired of fishing, so I decided I was going to walk home. It was half a mile through the cornfield or whatever. And I hadn't thought about it, but corn was 8 feet tall on each side of the road, and there were grasshoppers everywhere, all over me. From that day on, anything that flies and that lands on you, no thanks. It gives me some panic just thinking about it. What would be your spirit animal? I would say an owl. I think owls are really cool. Kind of mysterious, hidden. They're nocturnal, and they're usually by themselves. There's something about all that I just kind of resonate with. So I would say an owl would be one spirit animal. What's the hardest lesson you've learned? I think without a doubt it would be that you can't please everybody. I think we all hear that when we're younger, but I think we all think in our heads, well, you can't, but I can. And you have to learn the hard way. Nope, I can't either. It's impossible. And what's been good for me is to realize that the harder you work to please certain people, they resist it all the more, because I think there are people who get annoyed by that. That's been really good for me to learn that sometimes people don't want that. I think maybe a corollary of this is that conflict is creative. I am horrified by that, but I think there is some truth to it sometimes. So not to be afraid of not pleasing everybody. Let's see. What is one or two of your favorite smells? Obvious answers here would be sandalwood, love sandalwood, and patchouli. Just very aromatic, I guess earthy fragrances. Love those. Also, I would say rosemary. If I walk by a rosemary bush, or if I buy fresh rosemary, I love to rub it between my fingers and just smell it. I think it's both sweet and savory. Or there's a nice sweetness, but a spice to it too that I just love that. Obviously, fresh mown grass. I love mint. I love the smell of mint. Lots of great fragrances out there. What's the last adventure you went on? Probably 2 years ago when I drove out to Oregon by myself. May not sound like a crazy adventure, but I think anytime you get in the car by yourself and drive for 2.5 days, I think that qualifies as an adventure, because there's some inherent risk you're taking traveling by yourself, and doing that much driving alone. I always kind of enjoy that. There's something energizing about the adventure, the risk, and like I have to stay awake. I have to drive. There's nobody else to take over for me, and whatever happens, I need to deal with it. So there's something kind of energizing about that for me, and makes it an adventure.